Hello, and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Here's what we're looking at. Is the city doing enough to crack down on fake taxis and ride shares? Carol Marine has the story.
The Naperville Bears? Amanda Vinicki is live outside Soldier Field with the latest on the Bears' search for a new stadium.
Doesn't quite have that ring. A warning about the risks of social media on children's mental health as school lets out for the summer.
It feels very grown up.
And Oscar-winning costume designer Ruth Carter on Black Panther, Spike Lee, and unexpected sources of inspiration.
Now our top story tonight, the Chicago Bears' search for a new stadium is expanding with talk of not just Arlington Heights and Naperville, but possibly other communities as well.
The discussion is also renewing talks about the team sticking with Chicago. Amanda Vinicki is outside the Bears' current home field with the latest. Amanda.
Yes, Taylor Swift has left the premises, so it's time to return our attention to the performers most closely associated with Soldier Field, and that, of course, is the Chicago Bears, who are really playing the field these days, and I don't mean football. Demolition is already underway at the former horse race track in Arlington Heights, which the team paid $200 million for back in February. Now, that had led a lot of folks to believe that the team was really set on making that northwestern suburb its new home. But no, now the Bears say, due to what it says is an overly high property tax bill, Arlington Heights is no longer the Bears' singular focus, which is why the team apparently accepted an invitation from the city of Naperville's new mayor, trying to entice the team to instead come there. Now, Arlington Heights Mayor Thomas Hayes said he'd always known that the Bears were going to keep the team's options open. He said it's an important distinction that Naperville made the overture. It was not the other way around.
And if I were the Bears, I would take the phone call. And if I were a local mayor who had property in my community, I would make efforts to try to attract an NFL franchise to my community as well. So I certainly understand where everybody's coming from.
But he says the Naperville talk has spurred some residents to push him to get more aggressive, more competitive, to lure and keep the Bears focused on Arlington Heights, while others have said good riddance. He, for one, though, isn't worried.
The Bears have been looking at the property at Arlington Park for about 50 years now, since the mid-1970s. And I really think it's their dream site, right in the middle of their fandom in the northwest suburbs. And so I really don't anticipate that they would walk away from this unique once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
Not so fast, though. This all could be a new opening for the city of Chicago. At least that is what State Representative Cam Buckner thinks. He is a close ally of new Mayor Brandon Johnson and on Johnson's transition team.
The Bears entertaining the idea of moving to Naperville, I think opens up a window of hope for those of us who have always thought that we should still be having conversations about finding a deal that makes sense for both the city of Chicago and the Chicago Bears organization. And I think Mayor Johnson really does deserve the opportunity to broker that deal.
Buckner's district includes Soldier Field, and he says it has that historic appeal, so he'd love the team to stay here, but he does say that Chicago needs to look at other locations, particularly because the Bears want to do more than have just a stadium. They want to host concerts, have a hotel, more development. He says that he knows that Mayor Johnson wants that chance to keep the Bears in Chicago, though he says that he has not spoken directly with Johnson about this since that meeting on Friday with between the Bears and Naperville. Mayor Johnson's office did not return a request seeking comment, nor, by the way, did the Bears. But I did speak with someone who's got direct knowledge of some of these conversations, and talks between the two sides, the city of Chicago and the Bears, could begin as early as this week, I'm told. Now, meanwhile, State Representative Marty Moylan, he's the representative that sponsored legislation that would essentially subsidize the Bears and getting them to Arlington Heights some, as well as giving some money to the city of Chicago to pay off the renovations from the last round here at Soldier Field. Moylan says that he remains focused on getting the best deal for the Bears. He says the team is frugal and focused on making sure the operations work. Moylan says that he did have votes to call that bill during the recently adjourned legislative session, but he says he didn't do so in order to give the community and to the team more time to work out a deal on what, again, the team had said were excessive property taxes. Now, Moylan does represent parts of the northwest suburbs, so he's particularly also interested in keeping the Bears focused on Arlington Heights. He says the development that the Bears are envisioning would be huge for the entire region.
Remember that Cook County won't get any sales tax if it moves to Naperville. So, President Preckwinkle is going to be saying, "Where's mine?" And all of a sudden it's going to go to Naperville. Rockford is threw their hat in the ring, and other cities are going to be throwing their hat in the ring because this is a multi-billion-dollar proposal. A dome stadium, we can have Super Bowls here.
Moylan says he has not seen the direct offer from Rockford, but he is aware of it. I tried to reach out to city officials there. By the way, Rockford, about a 2-hour drive or so from the city of Chicago. Rockford officials did not get back to me. As you can imagine, just as the Bears wouldn't want the Packers seeing their playbook, a lot of the players in terms of these negotiations are not particularly keen on making public their plays. With that, I will toss the metaphorical ball back to you guys in the studio.
Game's not over yet for Chicago.
Certainly not. Amanda, thank you.
And now to some more of today's top stories. Police say 9 people were killed by gunfire this weekend and 46 people shot in 31 separate shooting incidents across the city. That includes a mass shooting in the Austin neighborhood early Sunday morning that claimed the life of a 25-year-old woman. 5 other victims in that shooting are reported to be in good condition, with one other in critical condition right now with a gunshot wound to his chest.
Community groups are suing to put the brakes on a controversial new training facility for the Chicago Fire soccer team to be built on public housing property. The lawsuit alleges the Chicago Housing Authority and the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development violated civil rights by agreeing to lease out CHA land for the facility. The group say CHA hasn't come close on its promise to provide 775 public housing units on the property that once housed the ABLA homes.
Hundreds of thousands of Illinoisans are set to get a $95 payout from Google. That's thanks to a class action lawsuit settlement. Google struck a $100 million agreement with the state for violating Illinois' biometric privacy laws. So any user who appeared in a Google photo between 2015 and 2022 was eligible for the settlement, but they had to file their claim by last September. Around 687,000 state residents are in line for the payout, according to the Chicago Tribune. And coming up in the program, combating social media's harmful impact on youth.
But first, cracking down on fake taxis and ride shares. Carol Marine joins us with that story right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Ubers, taxis, and Lyfts, oh my! Chances are everyone watching has taken a ride. Tonight, we're going to introduce you to someone who says she was really taken for a ride. Carol Marine and students with the DePaul Center for Journalism, Integrity, and Excellence have been investigating complaints about unscrupulous drivers and what the city is doing to protect riders. Carol.
Paris, Chicago is anticipating a flood of tourists coming to the city for the Democratic National Convention next year, and of course Lollapalooza and NASCAR this summer. Locals and tourists who depend on rideshare apps and taxis to get around need to do so with their eyes wide open about how they're being driven and charged. Just ask Terry Khalil.
I decided I was taking a mini vacation, going from Minnesota to Chicago, and just be a tourist.
Like, for instance, going to Wrigley Field. Her trip began July 15th, 2022. Terry Khalil walked out of Union Station and into what she thought was a Chicago cab. Some 10 minutes later, she arrived, she says, at her hotel just off the Mag Mile and paid her fare.
He asked for my card. He ran it through Square, and I was off. Nothing out of the ordinary.
Until a short time later at dinner.
I'm sitting at dinner and I get an alert from my bank about a $240-some charge. And my stomach did a flip-flop.
People are getting quite brazen now.
It's no surprise to Joe Schwieterman, DePaul professor of public policy and transportation.
One of the bigger problems we're just seeing now is after events, when there's surges, to have unlicensed drivers, fake taxis, Ubers pulling up, offering people rides. There are often signage, fake signage, and people jump in out of a sense of trust.
Khalil filed a taxicab complaint and sent it to the city's Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection, the BACP.
I sent them all of the information I sent to the city. And then I got a response from the city.
This is the letter she received stating there is not enough information to identify the driver. And this is where our story takes a very sharp turn. In February, the city issued a warning about fake taxis, saying its Bureau of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection would process, investigate, and prosecute complaints that were filed on its website or complaints filed with 311. In her case, Terry Khalil gave the city the driver's name and address from her receipt. It read, Khalid Mahmood, located in Orland Park. Using data supplied by the Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection, our students found 9 formal complaints filed in just the last year linked to the name Khalid Mahmood, including a June 26, 2022 ride from Soldier Field to the Intercontinental Hotel following a Kenny Chesney concert, price tag $250. And an August 7, 2022 one-block ride for $236. In the database we examined, 3 other complaints filed with the city included license plate numbers, which go back to this Orland Park address and the name Khalid Mahmood. We visited that Orland Park address, where a man who identified himself as Khalid Mahmood declined an on-camera interview, but off-camera strongly disputed any involvement in driving an unauthorized cab or overcharging customers. Though, in the garage behind his apartment was a car with one of the license plates listed in the city database complaints. We repeatedly asked the city's BACP about those complaints and a number of times asked to do an on-camera interview. The BACP declined. Asked why, a spokeswoman only directed us to the city's website as an answer. So we asked 32nd Ward Alderman Scott Wagusback, who has tried unsuccessfully to tighten regulations on ride shares and taxis.
BACP could take that and should take that complaint, actively pursue it, up to the point where if criminal charges needed to be filed with the state's attorney, then they should hand it over as a whole file and say, here's what we've found.
As for Terry Khalil, her trip included memorable dinners out, a visit to the Art Institute, and that stop at Wrigley Field. Do you feel that city officials here in Chicago took your complaint seriously?
Not in the slightest. No. How could I? I just got the brush off, plain and simple.
We should note, in and around Chicago and its suburbs, there are a number of men named Khalid Mahmood. Our story deals only with the Khalid Mahmood who lives in Orland Park. Not only are there complaints filed against him with the city, but Amtrak police at Union Station, where Terry Khalil caught that ride, have filed charges of criminal trespass against Mahmood in 2018 and 2019, though those charges were later dropped, Paris.
Back to Terry Khalil, she experienced the good of Chicago and unfortunately the bad side of Chicago. What did she say about coming back?
She said, Paris, it's not in her future.
All right. Carol Marine and the DePaul Center for Journalism, Integrity and Excellence. Thank you very much. And up next, how to combat social media's harmful impact on mental health, right after this.
With the end of the school year just about here, kids will have a lot more time on their hands, which can often mean more screen time. Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy recently issued a warning saying that social media presents a, quote, profound risk of harm to kids' mental health. He's calling on families to set limits on social media use and for lawmakers to require tougher standards for technology platforms. Joining us now with more is Devorah Heitner, author of Screenwise and the upcoming book, Growing Up in Public, Coming of Age in a Digital World, coming out in September. Devorah Heitner, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. So data shows that youth mental health and suicidal ideation has worsened significantly since the pandemic. In the decade leading up to the pandemic, feelings of persistent sadness and hopelessness among young people increasing about 40%. How much do you think social media is contributing to the youth mental health crisis that we're learning about?
I think we need to really look at all of the things kids are facing: environmental destruction, shootings at schools. Social media may be a vehicle where kids are learning about some of these things, but it is not the only reason that kids are struggling. And it actually may be also a reason that we know that kids are struggling, because it's one of the places where kids are talking about mental health, which is ultimately a good thing.
Given the current situation, do you agree that social media needs to be viewed as a public health crisis?
I think crisis is a little bit panic-inducing. I do think parents want to pay attention to the ways we're teaching kids about social media. Who are they following? Do they understand its effects on their mental health? Are they aware of the algorithm and some of the toxic content that can come up? And I think the companies that make social apps need to do a better job responding to complaints about content, whether that's bullying, harassment, et cetera.
So going over some of the findings in the report, the average amount of time that kids use social media is 3.5 hours a day. Report says using social media more than 3 hours a day doubles the risk of depression and anxiety among teens. Is that alarming to you?
It's concerning, and I think we need to think about what are kids doing, what are kids losing out on when they're on social media that much, right? Are kids not moving their bodies? Are kids not having opportunities to have face-to-face interaction? But what can we do as a culture to make sure that there are spaces for kids to hang out? For kids who don't have any money, for example, is there a public library? Are there parks? Are there places for kids to go that are safe and welcoming? Are we doing enough in schools to make schools a social place when we see schools cutting down on recess? I worry that kids won't build the social skills they need for face-to-face hangouts. So I don't think it's just that social media is always the catalyst for this, but I do think we want to look at what are kids missing out on if they're spending 3.5 hours a day or more on social, for sure.
1 in 3 adolescents are using screens past midnight, most using social media. Also, nearly half of teens say social media makes them feel worse about their body image. Is social media particularly harmful for teenage girls?
Social media can be risky for kids of any gender in relation to body image, and that's a good place where we want to explicitly teach kids any content around exercise, maybe adjacent to diet content. Diet content is toxic, right? So we need to make sure that we're really talking with kids about the algorithm and who they follow, and encouraging them to follow folks who are body positive, body affirming, or just follow your own friends and don't follow, celebrities and influencers, because that's where some of that challenge can come in. I do think there are some girl-specific and boy-specific challenges that we can talk about, and the ways that social media can support toxic masculinity or misogyny is worth talking to kids about, for sure.
Surgeon General is calling for more transparency from social media companies. What steps would you like to see those media companies take to protect teenagers?
I think social media companies should look at the circulation of misinformation. I think any content that supports eating disorders or self-harm, content that supports substance abuse or makes it seem attractive and alluring to young kids or any of us should be looked at. And I think part of the problem is the profit motive goes against taking down content that is harmful or that is just rage-inducing as well. We know the algorithms kind of favor rage and mashing on those buttons and people getting into conflicts with one another. Things like the like button also keep us coming back for more. They're really designed to get us where we're the most human. So I think all of those design factors do need a look. And again, when they do these big layoffs, they're laying off some of the people who actually you would report bullying or harassment to. And we want those people to be there because we need to be able to get content taken down if it's harmful.
Something that you mentioned earlier before we let you go, some of the positive uses for social media. Remind us some of the ways that social media can be good for young people.
Social media can be a place where kids, especially kids with marginalized identities, can find other kids to connect with, whether that's kids in the LGBTQ plus communities, kids in other communities like the neurodiverse communities, kids with ADHD or autism, as well as adults. People are finding community in these spaces like Discord, Instagram, TikTok. And so I think we do need to look at the benefits and the affinity that people are finding there, as well as the harms. Like you mentioned, sleep. Obviously, if I had one hill to die on as a parent, I definitely do think sleep is super crucial, obviously for physical and mental health, especially for growing kids. Adolescents are already in a sleep deficit. So I would say even just taking the phone at night or making sure kids unplug at night to get their sleep would be a huge step for a lot of families.
I think a lot of families are also proponents of their kids getting sleep. Sometimes it's a fight. Devorah Heitner, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And of course, your new book, Growing Up in Public, Coming of Age in a Digital World, is set to be released in September. Viewers can read an excerpt on our website. Up next, costume designer Ruth Carter talks about her storied career in Hollywood films. Stay with us. Ruth Carter is a groundbreaking costume designer known for her long collaboration with filmmaker Spike Lee and her award-winning work on the Black Panther movies. Her success came with many years of work, deep research, and a hunger for new skills. Her work's been featured in a traveling exhibition and now in a new book, The Art of Ruth E. Carter. She'll be in town this month for the Chicago Humanities Festival, and Chicago Tonight's Nick Blumberg recently caught up with her.
Wow, I got it.
Ruth Carter always knew she could be a first.
Because I thought there hasn't been another Black costume designer to win the Oscar. And I was aware of it for many, many years. And I kind of wondered if it might be me.
It was. In 2019, she made history as the first Black costumer to win an Academy Award. The fact that it was a movie Carter invested so much of herself in raised the emotional stakes.
When it dawned on me on Black Panther 1 that I was a front runner, then I really wanted it.
This year, Carter was awarded for the sequel, Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, and she made history again as the only Black woman with 2 Oscars.
Thank you to the Academy for recognizing the superhero that is a Black woman.
Carter's work is known for the heavy influence of Afrofuturism. It's a concept she embraces, but says is hardly new.
In the 80s, we called it neo-soul. In the 60s, it was Black Power. As the African diaspora kind of unites, we are starting to understand ourselves a lot more.
With that understanding comes a melding of African heritage, technological wonders, and imagined futures. The Black Panther films are infused with those ideas, but Carter says it dates back to the start of her career on Spike Lee's School Days.
We had visions for representation on camera of, more positive images of ourselves.
Some of those images have been fictional, like Lee's seminal Do the Right Thing. Some of those images have been historical, Ava DuVernay's Selma, and another Spike Lee film, Malcolm X.
It was really a special trip and special time in filmmaking.
Carter's films are full of vivid colors, elegant fabrics, and textures that pop off the screen. But the materials that translate to Hollywood magic can sometimes be pretty mundane.
You might have a junk drawer and you have all of these one-offs, you have earrings and bits and baubles in your drawer. You go, why am I saving all this? Well, that kind of thing is very useful for me because I realize that you can create art with almost anything.
Carter says one of the common misconceptions about her job is that even on a huge Marvel movie, she's at a sewing machine constructing every costume herself.
No, I'm not behind a curtain like the Wizard of Oz, sewing away.
Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
These are big Hollywood movies, people. Carter commands a crew and works closely with the director and actors, but she still says it's important to pick up all the skills you can, however you can. Her advice to would-be costume designers?
Find a learning outlet, whether they go back to school or whether they volunteer at a theater costume shop, whether they get a job as a PA in a costume department. They have to be a sponge.
With awards recognition, an exhibition of her work, and a book that takes readers on a tour of her career, Carter's come a long way from someone who toiled as an intern for years after college. So how does it feel to look back at where she's been so far?
It feels very grown up. What I see is someone who really wanted to be here, who really wanted to do this type of work and really felt in her heart that she could achieve these goals and did.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Nick Blumberg.
Congrats to Ruth Carter on her success. Again, the book is called The Art of Ruth E. Carter, Costuming Black History and the Afro Future, from Do the Right Thing to Black Panther. She'll be speaking at the Music Box Theater as part of the Humanities Festival on June 11th. There's more information on our website.
Always a great festival. And that's our show for this Monday night. Please join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10. How much time is enough? Part 1 in our new series examining the elderly population in Illinois prisons.
And a pilot program partners paramedics and preventative health care. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and enjoy this evening.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a proud sponsor of diversity, equity, and inclusion-focused free continuing legal education for lawyers throughout the region.